In the first half of this DVD set, we have seen that many of our holidays are pagan in origin and were originally feasts to the gods of the pagan nations. Warnings against mixing heathen practices with Christianity reverberate throughout the Holy Scripture. 1 Corinthians 10:21 says, "Ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils." A good example of taking a pagan god and declaring its feast to the Lord is found in the story of the golden calf. The Bible tells us, "And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early on the morrow, and offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat, and to drink, and rose up to play." Aaron attributed to the calf what had been done by God. Not only did he attribute the works of God to this idol, but he declared the festival of this pagan god a feast to the Lord. The fact that this heathen festival was supposedly dedicated to God did not change God's opinion of it at all. God considers the customs of the heathens abominable. In the book of Leviticus, God told Israel, "And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Therefore shall ye keep mine ordinance, that ye commit not any one of these abominable customs, which were committed before you, and that ye defile not yourselves therein. I am the Lord your God." In light of this, whenever we follow traditions not ordained in the Word of God, it would be well to learn where the custom came from. Let's find the origin of some more holidays and their customs. There really is a beginning to the new year, so this holiday couldn't have pagan origins, could it? Or maybe it does. To discover where this holiday and its traditions originated, we will have to travel back in history. Different New Year's customs had their origin in various cultures. Our New Year's practice of making resolutions and breaking them has its origin in the ancient civilization of Babylon. Babylon was the first to adopt the practice of setting resolutions and judging by human nature. It's probable that they were also the first to break them. We read in the Bible, "Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay." The ancient Greeks celebrated a new year, and it is from them that Baby New Year came. The Greeks paraded a baby in a basket at the start of the new year to represent the spirit of fertility. Hence the modern New Year symbols of a newborn baby picturing the coming year, and an elderly man winding up the old year. Then we come to the ancient Romans, where several of our modern New Year's practices and symbols originated. In 46 BC, the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar first established January 1 as New Year's Day. Janus was the Roman god of doors and gates, and had two faces, one looking forward and one back. Caesar felt that the month named after this god, January, would be the appropriate door to the year. Caesar celebrated the first January 1 New Year by ordering the violent routing of revolutionary Jewish forces in the Galilee. Eyewitnesses say blood flowed in the streets. In later years, Roman pagans observed the New Year by engaging in drunken orgies, a ritual they believed constituted a personal reenacting of the chaotic world that existed before the cosmos was ordered by the gods. The ancient Romans celebrated the festival Saturnalia. The first day of the Saturnalia shifted during the lifetime of Rome. It began around the middle of December and continued until January 1st. In its midst was December 25th, the day as the Romans calculated when the sun was at its lowest ebb. Although a good portion of the practices of Saturnalia were transferred to the Christmas holiday, some can be found in the New Year celebration. Saturnalia was the birthday celebration of Saturn, the lord of death. At Saturnalia in the Roman amphitheater, gladiator shows took place. In the book The Two Babylons we read that gladiator shows were sacred to Saturn and that gladiators fought on the Saturnalia, and they did so for the purpose of appeasing and propitiating Saturn. The dead gladiators were considered human sacrifices to Saturn. Today we find the games are still a large focus at this time of year. Here is what one educational instructor said of what might be the modern counterpart of the ancient Roman games. Some of the most popular amusements, such as football and boxing, have become schools of brutality. They are developing the same characteristics as did the games of ancient Rome. The love of domination, the pride in mere brute force, the reckless disregard of life, are exerting upon the youth a power to demoralize that is appalling. Some may consider the football and other games around this time of year to be innocent fun. After all, unlike the gladiator games, these are just a game. But do these games create a lack of respect for human life? Could these games be giving the greatest human sacrifice, the human mind, to Saturn, the Lord of Death?
I used to work with a bunch of guys that like to watch football and car racing and lots of different kinds of sports. And one weekend after they had had some sort of football game, he came to work. He was just furious, and he was stomping around all day, and he was ranting and raving about what an awful decision the coach had made for this football team that was his favorite football team. And he was just furious, and he said, "If I had a gun in my hand, I'd hunt that guy down and kill him."
Aside from the fact that the games create a lack of respect for human life, are they also worship of the devil? The Super Bowl games have much in common with the Rose Bowl game, held on New Year's, although at the present time they are held in closer connection with the occult holiday of Imbolc. Although nothing new, this year, 2012, the Super Bowl's halftime show had some more blatant connections to occult worship in several of the ancient pagan nations. Madonna was the performer for the halftime show, and she wore on her head a horned crown. This resembles the horned headdress worn by Ishtar, the goddess of fertility. You can also see the ancient Roman and Egyptian symbolisms. Among other occult symbolisms, an all-seeing eye was projected onto the stage. Interestingly, Ishtarte was known as the eye goddess. The Egyptian goddess Ma'at also is said to have originally possessed the all-seeing eye, which later was transferred to Horus. Madonna's show ends with a dramatic final movement. As Madonna sings the words, "I hear you call my name and it feels like home," the floor opens up and she falls. Obviously, this is in honor of the devil. Was this his invitation to the Super Bowl held in his honor? Could this have been a worship service? A week before the Super Bowl, Madonna described on Anderson Cooper the spiritual importance she attributed to her halftime show. The Super Bowl is kind of like the Holy of Holies in America. I'll come at halfway of the church experience, and I'm gonna have to deliver a sermon. It'll have to be very impactful. Are the games really a worship of heathen deities? Do we still honor Saturn with gladiator games and fables at this time of year? Another name for Saturn is Kronos, and another name for Kronos is Father Time. Kathy Burns says, Kronos is the old man that is leaving the old year behind, and the baby crawling, or bringing the new year, is the rebirth of the god. The Bible gives us advice on whether playing around with the worship of Saturn is good or bad. Robert McCoy, a Masonic writer, says, that Baal was the Saturn of Greece and Rome. In Jeremiah, worship of Baal is classed with stealing, murder, adultery, and swearing falsely. Will ye steal, murder, and commit adultery, and swear falsely, and burn incense unto Baal, and walk after other gods whom ye know not? Perhaps this is because all of these sins were part of Baal worship, and many of them seem to be just as much a part of our modern New Year's celebration. Morality is not known to be a major part of our modern New Year's parties, but rather immoral behavior. Many are killed in car accidents by drunk drivers, victims or human sacrifices to the spirits. People make New Year's resolutions knowing that they will break them. All this is only modern Baal worship. Why do people think the New Year's celebration is necessary for us to celebrate? A book on making the holidays special states this: During some holiday seasons, I would say I believe holiday traditions are positively essential for our mental health. That has to be true of New Year's. Following Christmas as closely as it does, it helps to alleviate some of the letdown you feel after the big day. If you feel let down by something, is it of God? Does Jesus Christ let his people down? Or might it be the pleasures of sin, which are for a season? On New Year's, we hear plenty of noise in the form of noisemakers, firecrackers, and shouting. A children's encyclopedia gives a reason for all the noise. Shh, it's only seconds till midnight. The old year is dying, the new year is almost here. As the clock begins to strike 12, noise fills the air. Church bells ring, people toot horns and blow whistles. Everyone shouts, Happy New Year. Why all the noise? It's one way people show how happy they are. It's also an old custom. Long ago, people believed that loud noises scared away evil spirits. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But one good thing about New Year's Eve, you get to stay up a lot later than usual. Besides the noise, something else is said in this quote. New Year's is a time when many people stay up late. According to Wikipedia, every year up to 1 million people gather in Times Square to watch the ball drop, and it is watched on video by 70 million people in the United States. This ball is dropped at midnight, thus requiring people to stay up late. The psalmist says, It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows. For so he giveth his beloved sleep. Staying up late is not only not healthy for the body, it also has been proven to compromise our reasoning processes, and should not be done for unnecessary and frivolous things. You might find it of interest that the hour of midnight seems to be a time when occultists and pagans witness the work of Satan. In the book, A Trip into the Supernatural, we read what a Satanist priest had to say of the hour of midnight. The Master's altar was brought to its location in the same manner and by the same power the Druid priest employed to erect the Stonehenge structures, spirit power, or in other words, the process of levitation. The spirits have revealed to me the great accomplishments that of the Druid priests among the ancient Celts in France, England, and Ireland more than 28 centuries ago. I was shown that at the hours of noon and midnight during the full moon, the Druids levitated blocks of gray sandstone weighing as much as 28 tons into precise position to erect their places of worship. So Satan likes to work at the hour of midnight. God's time, on the other hand, is reckoned by sunset, as seen in the story of creation, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Another popular practice around New Year's and Christmas is drinking alcohol. In the article, Drunk Driving Deaths Hit Home at New Year's, the author, basing his statement on the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's statistics in December 2007, says, On average, there are 36 fatalities on American roadways every day. During Christmas, the average rises to 45 daily deaths and jumps to 54 on New Year's Eve. It seems that long car trips to see family, combined with feasts filled with eggnog and champagne, are the perfect recipe for drunk driving. At the end of the brief statistical summary of the NHTSA, they state, In summary, fatalities and crashes that involve one or more impaired drivers appear to increase significantly during Christmas and New Year's Day holiday periods. The number of fatalities per day of the holiday period in such crashes during both the Christmas Day and New Year's Day holiday periods is significantly higher than the fatalities per day for the rest of December. In Proverbs we read, Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth its color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. And wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. In contrast to holiday tradition, Jesus tells us, And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness, and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. We should be waiting for Christ to descend. This should be our focus, and nothing should be allowed to distract us. The abundance of holidays has ever been a distractionary technique. During festivals, huge crowds would converge on Rome's great amphitheater and many circuses to attend a day of games. In the vast Colosseum, up to 50,000 people could watch gladiators fight with wild beasts or other gladiators. These brutal spectacles were usually staged by the government, and one of their purposes was to divert the hordes of Romans unemployed. Eventually, as emperors continued to proclaim festive occasions, more than half the days of the year became holidays. We would do well to beware of frivolous merrymaking and drunkenness that causes us to be caught off guard to temptation. We see that it was during a time of merrymaking and celebration that Cyrus conquered Babylon. One book says this about Cyrus' invasion: in their very feeling of security lay the source of their danger. Cyrus resolved to accomplish by stratagem what he could not effect by force, and learning of the approach of an annual festival in which the whole city would be given up to mirth and revelry, he fixed upon that day as the time to carry out his purpose into execution. There was no entrance for him into the city, except he could find it where the river Euphrates entered and emerged, passing under its walls. He resolved to make the channel of the river his own highway, into the stronghold of his enemy. To do this, the water must be turned aside from its channel through the city. For this purpose, on the evening of the feast day above referred to, he detailed 3 bodies of soldiers. The first, to turn the river at a given hour into a large artificial lake a short distance above the city. The second, to take their position at the point where the river entered the city. The third, to take a position 15 miles below where the river emerged from the city. And these 2 latter parties were instructed to enter the channel just as soon as they found the river fordable, and in the darkness of the night explore their way beneath the walls, and press on to the palace of the king, where they were to meet, surprise the palace, slay the guards, and capture or slay the king. When the water was turned into the lake mentioned above, the river soon became fordable, and the soldiers, detailed for that purpose, followed its channel into the heart of the city of Babylon. But all this would have been in vain, had not the whole city, on that eventful night, given themselves over to the most reckless carelessness and presumption, a state of things upon which Cyrus calculated largely for the carrying out of his purpose. Are we ready for the coming of Christ, the King of Heaven? Or are we like the Babylonians, feasting and merrymaking, and unaware that we are being weighed in the balances of heaven? Now let us look at the holiday of Easter. Is this just an innocent day for children to hunt for eggs, and churches to hold sunrise services? Or does it have a more sinister, hidden meaning? First, where does the name come from? One writer said this: "What means the term Easter itself? It is not a Christian name. It bears Chaldean origin on its very forehead. Easter is nothing else than Astarte, one of the titles of Beltis, Queen of Heaven, whose name as pronounced by the people of Nineveh was evidently identical with that now in common use in this country. That name, as found by Layard on the Assyrian monuments, is Ishtar. When ancient Christians were willing to die, rather than offer a pinch of incense to the goddess Astarte, why do we celebrate a day that bears her name?" Another source says, Easter dates back to ancient times and was later linked to Christianity. The holiday is named after the Anglo-Saxon goddess of dawn and spring, Eastro or Eastre. Many Easter traditions and symbols have to do with birth, good luck, and fertility. So the name Easter came from the pagan goddesses. Although some may say it came from Astarte, and others from Istro or Istre, it really doesn't matter, since both were pagan goddesses, and both originated from Semiramis of Babylon. In most, if not all pagan idolatries, there is a mother and a child god. This can be seen from the worship in ancient Babylon to the worship of Christ and Mary in the Catholic Church. Now as we see, Christmas is the Child's Day, but now we see Easter is the Mother's Day. However, prior to Easter there is another holiday in honor of Tammuz. It is called Lent. One author tells us this: Lent is the commemoration of Tammuz's death. The legend of his death claims that he was killed by a wild boar when he was 40 years old. Therefore, Lent is celebrated one day for every year of Tammuz's life. Participants are to express their sorrow over Tammuz's untimely death by weeping, fasting, and self-chastisement. This is opposite of God's way of doing things. Interestingly, God had Israel wander 40 years. For the 40 days, the spies explored Canaan, whereas Tammuz has his followers mourn and fast 40 days for the 40 years of his life. In Ezekiel, we find that ancient Israel participated in the ancient ritual that evolved into Lent. Ezekiel wrote, "He said also unto me, Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations that they do. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north. And behold, there sat women, weeping for Tammuz." So we see that Lent is pagan. Now, what about some of the other traditions done around this time of year? Although the word Easter is in the Bible, that does not give reason to sanction its keeping, because obviously there are words like Baal and Molech in the Bible. It is used in connection with Herod, who was a nominal Jew, and whether it is of correct translation or not, its mention does not sanction the keeping of Easter, nor does it mean that the Bible is in error. The word translated Easter took place after the days of unleavened bread. In 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea chose the date upon which Easter was to fall. Robert Odom writes, "The ruling of the Council of Nicaea that the Pascha should be observed by all Christians on Sunday each year on the same day observed by Rome was a tremendous victory for the Church of Rome. They chose to have Easter fall around the spring equinox." Now in Ezekiel, another ritual is described after what we know to be modern Lent. Ezekiel tells us, "Then said he unto me, Hast thou seen this, O son of man? Turn thee yet again, and thou shalt see greater abominations than these. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east. And they worshipped the sun toward the east." Without a doubt, God considers sun worship to be an abomination. Yet this happens every year on Easter. The following is an excerpt from a so-called Protestant church. The church will hold a resurrection service at 7 a.m. conducted by, not to worship the sun, to worship the sun. Our service will begin outside at the memorial tree at 7 a.m. sharp. Resurrection services and sunrise services have their origin in paganism. As we have previously established, pagans worship toward the east because that is where the sun is first seen each day. They see it as its birth. Furthermore, if something is done correctly, should we really have to specify whether it is to worship Christ or the sun? But are sunrise services correct anyway? Was Jesus really raised at sunrise? Listen to what John recorded in his Gospel. "The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene, early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter and the other disciple, whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him." Mary Magdalene came while it was yet dark, and Jesus had already been raised. The other women came a little later, and that was at the rising of the sun. Thus things to do with the sunrise are pagan memorials of the sun god. In the tabernacle in the wilderness, built by the Israelites, God's presence was always manifested in the west at the Ark of the Covenant. "And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubims, which are upon the ark of the testimony of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel." In order to worship the sun, you also have to turn your back on God. What about hot cross buns? Surely they are innocent, but are they? This is what the Encyclopedia Britannica says. It is quite probable that the word bun, has a far older and more interesting origin, as is suggested by an inquiry into the origin of hot cross buns. These cakes, which are now solely associated with the Christian Good Friday, are traceable to the remotest period of pagan history. Cakes were offered by ancient Egyptians to their moon goddess, and these had imprinted on them a pair of horns, symbolic of the ox at the sacrifice of which they were offered on the altar, or of the horned moon goddess, the equivalent of Ishtar of the Assyro-Babylonians. The Greeks offered such cakes to Astarte and other divinities. This cake they called bous, ox, in an allusion to the ox-mark symbol on it, and from the accusative bun, it is suggested that the word bun is derived. Like the Greeks, the Romans eat cross bread at public sacrifices, such bread being usually purchased at the doors of the temple and taken in with them, a custom alluded to by St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 10:28. At Herculaneum, 2 small loaves about 5 inches in diameter and plainly marked with a cross were found. In the Old Testament are references made in Jeremiah 7:18 and 13:19 to such sacred bread being offered to the moon goddess. The cross bread was eaten by the pagan Saxons in honor of Oster, the goddess of light. The Mexicans and Peruvians are shown to have had a similar custom. The custom, in fact, was practically universal, and the early church adroitly adopted the pagan practice, grafting it onto the Eucharist. The boon with its Greek cross became akin to the Eucharistic bread or cross-marked wafers mentioned in St. Chrysostom's liturgy. In the medieval church, buns made from the dough for the consecrated host were to be distributed to the communicants after Mass on Easter Sunday. In France and other Catholic countries, such blessed bread is still given in the churches to communicants who have a long journey before they can break their fast. In the Bible, a similar situation concerning buns or cakes was recorded. The children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Notice that it was this practice that aroused the anger of God. Now let's look at one of the most common Easter rituals, egg hunting. According to various sources, the legend behind the egg is that a large egg fell from heaven and landed in the Euphrates River, where several wondrous-sized fishes rolled the egg ashore and into some wicker reeds, where several doves descended to incubate it. Soon out popped Ishtar, the spring goddess. This is where hunting for eggs and putting them in a wicker basket came from. But when the church adopted these practices, they tried to Christianize this pagan symbol. Greg Deuce says in his book Catholic Customs and Traditions, "The egg has become a popular Easter symbol. Creation myths of many ancient peoples center in a cosmogonic egg, from which the universe is born. In ancient Egypt and Persia, friends exchanged decorated eggs at the spring equinox, the beginning of their new year. These eggs were a symbol of fertility for them, because the coming forth of a live creature from an egg was so surprising to people of ancient times. Christians of the Near East adopted this tradition, and the Easter egg has become a religious symbol. It represented the tomb from which Jesus came forth to new life. This is blasphemy. The common symbol used at Easter for the creature coming forth from the egg is a chicken. What does this then make Christ? The pagan origin of Easter eggs goes even further. The goddess totem, the moon hare, would lay eggs for good children to eat. Ostrate was a maiden whose aspects of renewal and rebirth brought about the reappearance of bright spring flowers, baby chickens fresh from the shell, baby bunnies from their winter dens. Eggs were a symbol of both the sun god, the golden yolk, and fertility, the white shell symbolizing the white goddess, and were used both as talismans and eaten in ritual. So originally eggs were a symbol of the sun god and fertility. But what about the Easter bunnies? Here's what one writer said. To be perfectly correct, it is the hare, not the rabbit, who should be honored as the most famous secular Easter symbol. Easter is a movable feast dependent for its date on the phase of the moon, and from antiquity the hare has been a symbol for the moon, the rabbit has not. Hares are born with their eyes open, rabbits are born blind. The Egyptian word for hare was un, meaning open or to open, and the full moon watched open-eyed throughout the night. According to legend, the hare was thought never to blink or close its eyes. So then how did the hare of paganism evolve into the rabbit or bunny of Easter? We find the answer in the following quote from the book Trail of the Serpent. The bull, for example, was the earthly representative of the sun as the great fertilizer, as was also the rabbit and a multitude of other prolific animals. The hare became the rabbit because rabbit stood for fertility, and Easter is a fertility festival. Now what could be wrong with the tradition of new dresses for Easter? According to a couple sources, this too came from paganism. A popular Easter offering was freshly made or purchased clothes. The priests wore their best clothes while the Vestal virgins wore newly made white dresses. They also wore headgear like bonnets, and many adorned themselves in garlands of spring flowers. This seems to still take place today in the homes and churches of professed followers of Christ. Many who may not do egg hunts may still have connections to the Easter lily. Is this truly a Christian symbol? Having become symbolic of the season, churches worldwide decorate their altars with these beautiful flowers, and innumerable thousands of them are given away to women at Easter as gifts. Few, however, realize the ancient significance of such gifts. The so-called Easter lily has long been revered by pagans of various lands as a holy symbol associated with the reproductive organs. It was considered a phallic symbol. One might easily surmise what was being suggested by sending a gift of such nature in ancient times. Now, although the flower is not in itself evil, because of its pagan connotations, to use it in connection with a fertility festival is wrong. We should in all that we do avoid the appearance of evil. We are told, abstain from all appearance of evil. Do you abstain from the appearance of evil? In ancient times, the 14th through 15th days of February was the feast of Lupercalia. You will notice that February 14 and 15 is approximately 13 days from Imbolg, February 1 and 2. Lupercalia means the day of the wolf. The reason it is connected to wolves is because it is in honor of Lupercus, the wolf god. Speaking about Lupercalia, David Mayer wrote, "This was a day that was sacred to the sexual frenzy of the goddess Juno. This day also honored the Roman gods Lupercus and Faunus, as well as the legendary twin brothers who supposedly founded Rome, Remus and Romulus. These two are said to have been suckled by wolves in a cave on Palatine Hill in Rome. The cave was called Lupercal and was the center of the celebrating on the eve of Lupercalia, or February 14th. On this day, Lupercalia, which was later named Valentine's Day, the Luperci, or priest of Lupercus, dressed in goatskins for a bloody ceremony. The priest of Lupercus, the wolf god, would sacrifice goats and a dog, and then smear themselves with blood. These priests, made red with sacrificial blood, would run around Palatine Hill in a wild frenzy while carving a goatskin thong called a februa. Women would sit all around the hill as the bloody priest would strike them with the goatskin thongs to make them fertile. The young women would then gather in the city, and their names were put in boxes. These love notes were called billets. The men of Rome would draw a billet, and the woman whose name was on it became his sexual lust partner, with whom he would fornicate until the next Lupercalia, or February 14th. Thus, February 14th became a day of unbridled sexual lust. According to the booklet Baptized Paganism, the goatskin whips evolved into little arrows shot by Cupid, and matchmaking today occurs through the more purposeful exchange of Valentine cards. And Doc Marquis states, "And the two most famous sacrifices people would bring to the temple to the goddess were sweets, such as candies and spring flowers." The practices of the ancient Lupercalia appear to be the same in the modern St. Valentine celebration. We have the flowers and we have chocolate candies. Of course, there is nothing wrong with the flowers, or with giving them at this time of year. The wrong is in doing it in connection with the holiday. Interestingly, it appears that even a lesser-known holiday, such as Valentine's, has a connection to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. When the serpent tempted Eve, he said, "For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Thus the serpent told Eve that it would make her as gods, and would bring knowledge or wisdom. On an internet website speaking about chocolate, the following quote is found. Renowned botanist Carolus Linnaeus, who is credited with the foundation of the contemporary method of the technical classification of the species in the plant kingdom, aptly named the chocolate tree as Theobroma, which when translated into English literally means the food of the gods. During one of his explorations in 1519, the Spanish traveler Hernando Cortés and his warriors were spectators to a bizarre ritual at the Aztec Emperor Montezuma's royal court. While his subjects keenly watched him with admiration and awe, seated on an elevated golden throne, Emperor Montezuma, who was considered to be the living god by his countrymen, continually drank an infusion from a golden goblet. On inquiry, Cortez and his men came to learn that the bitter and dark brown drink was called chocolate by the native Indians, who showed their respects to the Spanish explorer and his soldiers by offering them the drink. The natives informed Cortez that the beans from which the drink were prepared was derived from heaven, and every sip of chocolate infused knowledge and wisdom among the people. Could this be a coincidence? Maybe it is. But if it isn't, could the serpent still be advertising his fruit under the lie that it won't kill you? It might be interesting to study out the health effects of chocolate. Now what about the little naked baby named Cupid? Is he pagan too? According to World Book Encyclopedia, Cupid, in Roman mythology, was the son of the goddess of love, Venus. He is called Eros in Greek mythology. A wound from one of his arrows made a person fall in love. So Cupid is the name of a pagan Roman god, originally a Greek god. The reason he was naked is because the Greeks required their athletes to be naked in the stadium. James Rossetti says that Olympic athletes served as models for those workmen who are fashioning idol Greek gods and goddesses for the people to worship. Thus the gods and goddesses were endowed with spectacular physical gifts that resembled those of the Olympic athletes, and the legends built to support these idols were that the Greek gods were almost always immoral and promiscuous. In the Bible, nakedness is a representation of sin. In the Garden of Eden, when there was no sin, Adam and Eve were clothed with light like God is. In Psalms 104:1 and 2 it says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, thou art very great, thou art clothed with honor and majesty, who coverest thyself with light as with a garment, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain." However, when they sinned, it says, "And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons." Why do you have a sinful figure plastered over everything? If we don't worship pagan gods, why do we have a pagan god in one of our holidays? Does seeing a naked baby all over everything really help you to keep your mind pure? So why is red associated with Valentine's? David Mayer says, "The color red was sacred to that day because of the blood." Dr. J. Simon says, "Red is the color of indiscretion, sensuality, passion, and prostitution." Now we do not condemn the color red. It is seen in God's creation. We see it in space, in the fall leaves, in flowers, in the rainbow, in fruit, and many other places. The color red is not bad. It is when it is used in connection with a pagan day, a naked pagan god, and others that it shouldn't be used. Now why the hearts? According to various sources, another name for Tammuz was Cupid, which means desire. Tammuz, the god named Desire, was married by his own mother, Queen Semiramis. In Babylonian, the word heart was Baal. See Daniel 6:14 in Strong's Concordance. In the depictions of Tammuz, the heart-shaped fruit of Persea was often found in his hand. Tammuz thus became known as the god of the heart. This is a counterfeit. Mark 12:30 says, "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength." This is the first commandment. We are to give our heart to Christ, not Cupid. Is it right to allow a pagan god to have the power to make us love or hate? Do we draw nigh to God with our lips, but our heart is far away in Cupid's or the devil's keeping? Many today on the 17th of March dress in green, display three-leaf clovers and leprechauns. Does this holiday that bears the title of a saint really have saintly origins? Exactly who is this St. Patrick that we claim to honor on the 17th of March? History points out clearly that the true St. Patrick was not a Roman Catholic. One source says, "It, the papacy, labored to gather Patrick into its fold by inventing all kinds of history and fables to make him a papal hero. It surrounded with a halo of glory a certain Palladius, apparently sent by Rome to Ireland in the midst of Patrick's success. He has also been called Patrick." So there was a true Patrick and a false Patrick, but they are very different in character. The true Patrick kept the commandments of God and believed in the Bible. Patrick rejected the union of church and state. More than 100 years had passed since the First World Council at Nicaea had united the church with the empire. Patrick rejected this model. He followed the lesson taught in John's Gospel, when Christ refused to be made a king. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." Not only the Irish apostle, but his famous successors, Columba in Scotland and Columbanus on that continent, ignored the supremacy of the papal pontiff. They never would have agreed to making the Pope a king. When the papacy tried to take over the Celtic Church, they found that they needed to replace Patrick with a false Patrick. Centuries were to pass before the papacy discovered that his, Patrick's, merits were too firmly established to be overlooked. It, the Catholic Church, labored to gather Patrick into its fold by inventing all kinds of history and fables to make him a papal hero. The papacy invented a false Patrick that they said was a Roman Catholic, since the Irish held the true Patrick in high regard, to put a wedge into the Celtic Church in order to make them easier prey to the errors of the papal church. It seems to have been customary in the Celtic churches of early times, in Ireland as well as Scotland, to keep Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, as a day of rest from labor. They obeyed the fourth commandment literally upon the seventh day of the week. Columba, a great missionary student of Patrick's school in Ireland, foretold his death in a way that shows that at his time the Irish church was keeping the Sabbath. Here is how one historian relates it. Having continued his labors in Scotland 34 years, he clearly and openly foretold his death, and on Saturday, the 9th of June, he said to his disciple, "Diarmait, this day is called the Sabbath, that is, the day of rest, and such will it truly be to me, for it will put an end to my labors." Thus, if you want to honor the true Patrick, perhaps it would make sense to honor the day he kept in honor of his God, the God of the Bible, who said, "Remember the seventh-day Sabbath." But instead of honoring the true Patrick on St. Patrick's Day, do we perhaps honor the papal counterfeit? Why do we celebrate it on the 17th of March? Regardless of the official reasons, why do the occultists say we celebrate on that day? A witch states the following: "It wasn't arbitrary that the day honoring St. Patrick was placed on the 17th of March. The festival was designed to coincide, and it was hoped to replace the pagan holiday known as Ostara, the second spring festival, which occurs each year, which celebrates the rebirth of nature, the balance of the universe when the day and night are equal in length, and which takes place at the spring equinox, March 22nd this year." In other words, St. Patrick's Day is yet another Christian replacement for a much older and ancient pagan holiday, although generally speaking, Ostara was most prominently replaced by the Christian celebration of Easter. The eggs and bunny come from Ostara traditions, and the name Easter comes from the pagan goddess Ostre. Now what about some of the practices and symbols at this time of year? First, let's look at the leprechaun. Does this cute little creature have a cute origin? What most people don't realize is that the word troll comes from the Old Norse word for demon, and is defined by some sources as a devil, a person of great wickedness or maliciousness. So when your child brings home a troll, he or she has actually brought home a representation of a demon. These demons are also disguised as gnomes, pixies, dwarves, leprechauns, and elves, as well as many other creatures. I'm sure you recall the Keebler elves. Of course Santa has his elves too. There's Snow White with her 7 dwarves, and Cinderella with her fairy godmother. All these are demonic representations, but they are presented in such a cute way that most people have no idea of the evil character behind these objects. Do we really want to display a demon on our decorations and clothing at this time of year? Now why the green? Everything is green at this time of year as far as decorations go, and if you don't wear green, you get pinched. But why is this? According to Doc Marquis, but he, the leprechaun, is green for a reason, because he is an earth creature. This is why you see all the green in St. Patrick's Day. It represents nature. This is a nature-oriented occult ceremony. Could the pinching of those who do not wear green be persecution of those who do not worship nature, those that resist pantheism? Another reason for the green is, the color green has for many years been regarded as an unlucky color in Britain and America. The origin of this superstition is that it was the color of the fairies and little people, and that they had such power over it that they could easily steal away anyone they found wearing green. In contrast, it is interesting to note that in several European countries, green is regarded as lucky because of its association with the spirits of the trees. And superstition there says that to hang green branches over doorways not only keeps away misfortune, but drives witches and demons off. Remember that fairies and little people are just representations of demons. Although I don't believe it is wrong to wear green, if you wear green at this time of year because of St. Patrick's, could it be that you are giving the demons a foothold in your heart? Now, a note of interest is that since most of the symbols of this holiday are associated with luck, it seems that they might be dedicated to Lucifer, since the word luck is derived from the word Lucifer. Saying that because something good happened to you, you have good luck, is doing away with God, because every good and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights. One thing seen a lot at this time of year is 3- and 4-leaf clovers. Although there is nothing wrong with clover growing in your yard, why is everything decorated with it at this time? According to legend, Patrick used the 3-leaf clover to teach about the Godhead, but where did it actually originate? The Druids believed that a 4-leaf clover could help in spotting witches or other demons. Some modern-day spiritualists claim that a 4-leaf clover releases energy and helps one's judgment. It is said that Patrick used the clover to explain the Trinity of God. However, the shamrock, Persian word for 3-leaf clover, known as a shamroy to Ireland, was a symbol used in Druidism, pagan demon worship, to explain the 3 faces of the goddess found in the moon: maiden, mother, and crone. Now, I do not discredit the fact that Patrick may have used the 3-leaf clover to teach, but if he did, it was probably in ignorance of the pagan concepts associated with the 3-leaf clover. Or it could be that this was just a legend that those bringing paganism into the church came up with to help promote the use of this pagan symbol. Whatever the case, should we who know better use the ignorance of our fathers as an excuse for pagan idolatry? If we wish to honor the true Patrick, let us honor his God by keeping the Sabbath and cutting off idolatrous paganism. We have looked at some of the more major holidays. Now we will look at some of the more minor ones. In this video, we cannot possibly cover every holiday, but we have tried to cover some of the more well-known ones. First, we will take a short look at Imbolc, or Groundhog's Day. In Masonic and Occult Symbols Illustrated, it tells how witches celebrate Imbolc, also known as Imbolc. Imbolc is also known as the Feast of Torches, Oimulk, Lupercalia, Feast of Pan, Snowdrop Festival, Feast of the Waxing Light, Brigid's Day, and probably by many other names. Some female Wiccans follow the old Scandinavian custom of wearing crowns of lit candles, but many more carry tapers during their invocations. This custom of a crown of candles is unfortunately fed to the children, particularly girls, through a seemingly innocent book, The American Girl, Kirsten. Whether people realize it or not, our children are being desensitized to witchcraft. Now some may wonder why it is that Imbolc has been substituted with the groundhog. Imbolc is the day marking the recovery of the goddess or Earth Mother. How does that match with a groundhog? The following quote shows why. What most people do not realize is that the pagan view of Groundhog's Day, Imbolc, represents the Earth Mother. Consider the uncanny parallels between the groundhog and the Earth Mother. As the Earth Goddess sleeps inside the Earth during the winter season, so does the groundhog. Both the goddess and the groundhog awaken in the spring. Both the goddess and the groundhog represent the cycle of rebirth and renewal, and both the goddess and the groundhog complete the cycle of reincarnation. Even on the surface, the groundhog divines the future, a practice forbidden by God in Deuteronomy 18:10. As we see, this holiday isn't so innocent. Does the seemingly harmless holiday of April Fools also have a danger hidden behind the fun? First off, April Fools is 13 weeks from New Year's, but disregarding all occult numbers, can a true Christian keep this holiday? In Psalms 14:1 it says, "The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God." Should we really be keeping a holiday that is fit only for atheists and skeptics? To add to that, this day for those who celebrate is typically done where someone tells a lie about something, and then when the person realizes they were deceived, the first person says, "April Fools." In the book of Proverbs, it describes this situation. It says, As a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man that deceiveth his neighbor, and saith, Am I not in sport? The Bible says a person who lies and then says, just joking, or April Fools, is like a madman. But to make this even more non-Christian, since this holiday results in calling people fools, we read in Matthew 5, Jesus says, But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council, but whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Now we will take a quick look at May Day. It falls on Beltane, a day of human sacrifice. This is how one witch described the ritual done on Beltane. Fires are lit, and the great fertility ritual of the god and goddess is celebrated with maypoles, music, and considerable frolicking in the greening countryside. May is a lusty month. The 5th month in the year expresses all the sexual and sensual meanings in the number 5. The sexual forces of springtime abound everywhere, and as the folk songs say, we go a-maying. Symbolically, we celebrate these forces of the season by erecting maypoles around which young men and women dance, entwining multicolored ribbons, weaving themselves together as they wrap the pole in festive colors. As a side note, although occultists may have sensual meanings for the number 5, God is the opposite. He gave us 5 senses which we should guard against sin. He tells us to touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and to take heed what ye hear, and many other commands to guard our sight, taste, and smell. And in Isaiah 33:15-16 it says, He that walketh righteously, and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from the holding of bribes, that stoppeth his ears from the hearing of blood, and shutteth his eyes from seeing evil. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be in the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his waters shall be sure. God's promise is for those who are guarding their 5 senses. On the subject of the maypole, we find out from an article in a New Age magazine that it was the maypole, with its phallic and pagan connotations, that brought May Day into disrepute among the 17th century Puritans. In both Old and New England, the custom of dancing around the maypole was outlawed by religious authorities. Perhaps we should learn from the Puritans. We will continue by looking at the summer solstice. The summer solstice, or Letha, is not a common holiday for us to observe, although the nativity of St. John falls on it. But many of us observe it second-hand, or allow our children to. According to Hyslop in the Two Babylons, one of the big parts of this Midsummer Night Festival was fire. Before Christianity entered the British Isles, the pagan festival of the 24th of June was celebrated among the Druids by blazing fires in honor of their great divinity, who, as we have already seen, was Baal. But to take a step further, we find the following description in C.S. Lewis's book, The Chronicles of Narnia. What is it, Aslan? Said Lucy, her eyes dancing and her feet wanting to dance. Come, children, said he, ride on my back today. Oh, how lovely, cried Lucy, and both girls climbed on the warm golden back they had done no one knows how many years before. Then the whole party moved off, Aslan leading, Bacchus and his Maenads leaping and rushing and turning somersaults, the beasts brushing around them, and Silenus and his donkey bringing up the rear. Then 3 or 4 red dwarfs came forward with their tinder boxes and set light to the pile, which at first crackled, then blazed, and finally roared, as a woodland bonfire on a midsummer night ought to do. And everyone sat down in a wide circle around it. Then Bacchus and Silenus and the Maenads began a dance far wilder than the dance of the trees. Not merely a dance for fun and beauty, though it was that too, but a magic dance of plenty, and where their hands touched and their feet fell, the feast came into existence. Sides of roasted meat that filled the grove with delicious smell, and wheaten cakes and oaten cakes. To the uneducated reader, this sounds pretty innocent, although with our previous knowledge that dwarves represent demons, and knowing that Bacchus is a pagan god, may make some wonder. But here's what a former witch said about it. The above is clearly a description of the witch's sabbat of midsummer or the summer solstice, and it is described as such perfect detail. Certainly, by now enough is known to denounce this work as satanic and antichrist. Many people have unknowingly placed this book in their children's hand as a book revealing the great battle between God and Satan, but did not realize that they were placing in their hands a book that contained witches' sabbats, chants, and other evils hidden behind the symbols. To avoid issues like this, Paul wrote to young Timothy, Neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions, rather than godly edifying, which is in the faith. So do. The Greek word for fables comes from a word meaning to initiate, that is, by implication, to teach, instruct. Thus Paul warned against even educational fiction. After all, everything is educational, but the question we should ask ourselves is, what is it teaching? After having talked about the other holidays, we will take a short look at birthdays. Solomon said, "The simple inherit folly, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge." We should know why we do things, not just inherit the ideas of our fathers. Do you know why you put candles on your cake? Is it for practicality, or is it an ancient ritual? First off, let's see if the Bible says anything about birthdays. In Job we read, "And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters, to eat and to drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their fasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually." This passage could be referring to birthdays, but let's look at some passages that specifically mention birthdays. "And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler, and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them." This is the Old Testament passage that refers specifically to a birthday celebration, and it is connected with a death. In the New Testament, we see the same thing. "But when Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodias danced before them, and pleased Herod, whereupon he promised with an oath to give her whatsoever she would ask. And she, being before instructed of her mother, said, Give me here John Baptist's head in a charger. And the king was sorry, nevertheless for the oath's sake, and them which sat with him at meat. He commanded it to be given her, and he sent and beheaded John in the prison." Could this be a message from God, that the way the pagans celebrate their birthdays is wrong? So exactly how did the pagans celebrate? For thousands of years, people all over the world have thought of a birthday as a very special day. Long ago, people believed that on a birthday, a person could be helped by good spirits or hurt by evil ones. So when a person had a birthday, friends and relatives gathered around to protect him or her. And that's how birthday parties began. The idea of putting candles on birthday cakes goes back to ancient Greece. The Greeks worshipped many gods and goddesses. Among them was one called Artemis. Artemis was the goddess of the moon. The Greeks celebrated her birthday once each month by bringing special cakes to her temple. These cakes were round like a full moon, and because the moon glows with light, the cakes were decorated with lighted candles. Making cakes to some heavenly goddess goes back quite far. It is mentioned in Jeremiah 44:19. "And when we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven, and poured out drink offerings unto her, did we make her cakes to worship her, and pour out drink offerings unto her without our men? Remember that, whether therefore ye eat or drink, or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God." With your birthday, do things to the glory of God. A birthday thank offering is a good idea. Thank God for every year of life He has given you. This year, for one birthday, we had a Vespers recalling Ebenezer stones, the way the Lord hath led us in the past. Even though it was held on the birthday, we focused more on the new birth than on our real birthday, singing hymns and reading verses along the new birth theme. On the paper stones, the person whose birthday it was wrote the things that had been major waymarks in their spiritual walk. The younger children enjoyed a Pilgrim's Progress parade, marching, singing, led by a flag with the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And instead of restricting dessert to just cake, why not do the child's or adult's favorite dessert, whether it be cake, or pie, or cookies? It is hard for many to stop doing things that their family may have been doing for several years, but God can help you overcome the traditions and establish good Christian traditions that glorify God. For those that may still want to continue traditions regardless of their origin, they should remember the Holy Roman Emperor that Martin Luther stood before at the Diet of Worms. His story of why he rejected Luther's word should make some think. On the day following Luther's appearance, Friday the 19th of April, the emperor ordered a message to be read to the Diet, which he had written in French with his own hand. "Descended from the Christian emperors of Germany," said he, "from the Catholic kings of Spain, from the archdukes of Austria, and from the dukes of Burgundy, who all have been renowned as defenders of the Roman faith, I am firmly resolved to imitate the example of my ancestors." Because his fathers did, he would uphold the papacy, with all its cruelty and corruption. Thus he took his position, refusing to accept any light in advance of what his fathers had received, or to perform any duty that they had not performed. There are many at the present day, thus clinging to the customs and traditions of their fathers. When the Lord sends them additional light, they refuse to accept it, because not having been granted to their fathers, it was not received by them. We are not placed where our fathers were, consequently our duties and responsibilities are not the same as theirs. We shall not be approved of God in looking to the example of our fathers, to determine our duty instead of searching the word of truth for ourselves. Our responsibility is greater than was that of our ancestors. We are accountable for the light which they received and which was handed down as an inheritance for us, and we are accountable also for the additional light which is now shining upon us from the Word of God. God tells us, "And the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent." In Revelation, angels are sent warning and giving commands to the people of God, especially in the last days. The first angel gives his message, which is the everlasting gospel. "Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea and the fountains of waters." Do we, while celebrating the holidays, fear God and give him the glory? Would we do the same things if we thought about the fact that we are being judged, and our probation is about to be forever closed, whether we are righteous or wicked? The second angel sounds the cry, "Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication." If Babylon has fallen, why do we continue to glorify her by keeping her days of celebration? And then the third angel sounds, "If any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb." Now there are many misunderstandings about what the mark of the beast is, but the student of prophecy will find that the beast is the papacy, and his mark is the opposite of God's mark, or seal. In Exodus we read of God's mark, "Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." One of the meanings for sign is mark. Thus, since the Sabbath is God's mark, Sunday is the beast mark. Let's see what they have to say about changing the Sabbath to Sunday. Of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change was her act, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power. Now to finish, the third angel's message ends with the words, "Here is the patience of the saints, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." Do we keep the commandments of God when we commit idolatry? Are we following the messages given by these three angels? Instead of trying to make excuses, let us make a decision between following God or paganism. There is no other choice. If the Lord be God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. Choose you this day whom ye will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. After having condemned the pagan practices, some may wonder what to do with their children. God does not just ask us to depart from evil, he also says to learn how to do well. Replacement is a biblical principle, not taking a pagan practice and trying to make it Christian, but having a Christian replacement to take the place of the pagan practice. It is in the field of replacement that the creativity that God has given us should be used within the boundaries of his law. Whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God. Now in the line of replacement, I would like to say a word on Thanksgiving. This is one of the only holidays that I am aware of that is celebrated that a true Christian could celebrate. Unlike some of the others, the word Thanksgiving is a biblical word used in a definitely good sense. It is used 28 times in Scripture. Among these 28 times we find the verse, "Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name." Although we should give thanks all year, there is nothing wrong with having a day of the year to especially thank God. Our family has a Thanksgiving tradition which goes as follows. Everyone around the table says things they are thankful for according to their age. If they are 20 years old, they list 20 things. If only 5, then they say 5 things. We also have a Thanksgiving Eve Vespers focusing on Bible verses about Thanksgiving and singing hymns of thanksgiving to God. As with any of the other times of the year, it is always appropriate to turn our thoughts toward the poor and less fortunate, and thus give glory to God by helping the least of these. Although Thanksgiving is not wrong, we should be careful even at this holiday not to engage in pagan or wrong practices. Even something good can be misused. One of these wrong practices is the sin of gluttony. In Moses' time, gluttons were stoned. We read, "If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father, or the voice of his mother, and that, when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, This our son is stubborn and rebellious, he will not obey our voice, he is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shalt thou put away evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear." Even in the New Testament, gluttony is considered an evil. "For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who mind earthly things." Although this verse can apply to anything that glorifies the belly or womb, one of the applications is to gluttony or unhealthful eating. From these two verses, it seems pretty dangerous to partake in gluttony. Now we have seen that there is one holiday that others would celebrate, that if celebrated properly, we can celebrate too. But our children get pelted with worldly holidays all year round. Is there any way to provide a replacement for them that is educational and spiritually uplifting, but not pagan and occultic? The principle of replacement is a biblical principle. In Romans 12:21 we read, "Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good." And Jesus told the story of what happens when you get rid of something bad and don't fill the space with something good. "When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return into my house from whence I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Then goeth he and taketh with himself 7 other spirits, more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation." Now the following are just some ideas to get started. As long as you do it in the boundaries of God's principles, use your creativity. For those that are just adults, no replacement may be needed, but these are ideas for children, particularly small ones. We replace Christmas with something we call Agape Advent Season. This starts at Thanksgiving and continues through the whole month of December. Instead of focusing on just the birth of Christ, we focus on the whole story: Jesus Christ's birth, his death, and particularly his second advent. One thing that we do at this time of year is to have a box, which we put money in to give to someone who needs it, one of the least of these. A box similar to this we keep year-round for birthday thank offerings and any other offerings. Another activity at this time of year, since our focus is on God's love, the agape part of the season, is an agape feast. We typically try to do symbolic food of some sort, such as things representing objects or characteristics of God in the Bible. In the agape feast, no one may ask for something themselves. Someone else has to ask them if they want it. Here is a demonstration of how this works.
Daniel, would you like some dried fruit roll? Sure. Would you like some smoked almonds? Yes, please.
At the end of Agape Advent season, we celebrate Remembrance Day as a replacement for New Year's. We believe that we have nothing to fear for the future except as we shall forget the way the Lord hath led us and his teaching in our past history. In the Bible we are told, "Remember his marvelous works that he hath done, his wonders and the judgments of his mouth." All year long we keep a diary of miracles, answered prayers, and other things God has done for us. On Remembrance Day, we first go around the table and have everyone tell at least one miracle or answered prayer from the past year. Then we read the diary and realize how many ways God has led us that we have forgotten. We have replaced Halloween with Reformation Night. Halloween may not need a replacement because you can just say it's the devil's holiday. However, if you need ideas, here is what we do. October 31, although occultists see it as a day of great evil, Protestants can celebrate October 31 because Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Church on that day. And according to one website, Reformation Day is both a religious and civil holiday observed on October 31. Reformation Day commemorates Martin Luther's posting of his 95 Theses on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany on October 31, 1517, commonly regarded as the pivotal act that launched Europe into the era known as the Protestant Reformation. Reformation Day also celebrates the religious, social, and political changes brought about by the Reformation. Reformation Day is widely observed as a religious holiday in Lutheran and Reformed church circles. It is celebrated as a civil holiday in Slovenia and in certain German states. Something we should do always is to apply some of the things that Martin Luther said to our lives, such as, "If I profess with the loudest voice and clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God except precisely that little point which the world and the devil are at that moment attacking, I am not confessing Christ, however boldly I may be professing Christ. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proved, and to be steady on all the battlefield besides is mere flight and disgrace if he flinches at that point." One of our traditions at this time of year is to play court or inquisition. Since back in time men were called to answer for their faith, we chose as an activity to do mock trials. In 1 Peter 3:15 we are admonished, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear." Every person called to the stand is asked to give reasons for what he believes from the Bible. This game made us realize how much about what we believe we really didn't know. Here is a demonstration of how we do mock court.
Court is now in session. Will the defendant give proof from the Scriptures for the creation of the world by God, using somewhere other than the Genesis account?
In John 1:1-3, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made."
Around the time of Easter, we have a time when our focus is on the sanctuary. This is a perfect time for this because when Jesus died, type met antitype is displayed in the sanctuary. One idea is to have a trespass offering box for whenever someone does something unkind, they can pay some money. Modeling clay or felts can be used to tell the children about the wilderness sanctuary. A related Vespers is also a good idea. Season of Jubilee is our replacement for the worldly holiday of St. Valentine's. Since the world focuses on loving your friends, we focus on loving your enemies. In the Bible we are told, "If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee. For if ye love them which love you, what thank have ye? For sinners also love those that love them." And Jesus told us, "But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." This is a time we dedicate especially to heaping coals of fire on our enemies' heads. We have done things from writing a card to making a nice dessert, and then we give it to our enemies. Sometimes we have seen results and sometimes not, but whether it changes your enemies or not, it will change you. At this time of year, we read stories about forgiveness. One of the best things about replacing is you can create your own ideas and not be limited to certain times. Everything in the Bible is a treasure. Whenever we study, we will learn more. In the Bible, we read of a parable Jesus told. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a treasure hid in a field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for the joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. Over and over, we find that the promises in the Bible are a treasure. Sometimes we have to dig for it, just like the treasure hidden beneath the surface. Robert Boyle, the chemist who formulated Boyle's Law, said of the Bible, "It is a matchless volume. It is impossible we can study it too much, or esteem it too highly." And a 19th century speaker said, "And there is not a line in that Bible, the principles of which will exist through all eternity, in which there will not be an unfolding and a preciousness which we do not see today. There is an inexhaustible treasure and a fullness beyond. It is an infinity that we can never attain to. And yet the simplest mind that is in this room can comprehend the precious truth that is in the doctrine of salvation. And the mightiest intellect that ever existed on this earth can feast upon the riches and the glory that lie beneath the surface of the reading." Of course, the thing to do with the children for replacement is not exactly a Bible study, but it does demonstrate some of the principles. It is a Bible treasure hunt. This makes a nice replacement for the Easter egg hunt for children, and if they have any choice, it may not be limited to once a year. It can be done whenever. We call it a Rainbows of Promise hunt. Here is the way we prepare a Rainbows of Promise hunt. We took paper in the colors of the rainbow, stamped a rainbow on one side, and wrote a Bible promise or verse of advice on the other. We rolled them up and placed a rubber band around them. We laminated the paper so it could be reused. Then we hid them, and the children searched for them as for hidden treasure. After they have all been found, we took them inside and had a special worship where everyone read their favorite Bible text among those they found. We sung some of the scripture verses we know that have been put to music. Week of Prayer is something we typically do around August or September. We are told in James that the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Our main tradition at this time of year is to take a dead branch or small tree and make paper leaves, flowers, and fruit for it. On the leaves we write the names of people to pray for. If we see some results start, we put the name on the blossom, and if the prayer is answered, we put the name on the fruit. Stories of answers to prayer can also be read. This reminds us of Aaron's rod that budded, blossomed, and fruited under the power of the Spirit of God. The last holiday replacement I will cover is the 4th of July. Around July 4, we like to celebrate our heavenly citizenship. Some who have come from other countries appreciate the fact that they can celebrate it too. Philippians says, "For our conversation is in heaven, from whence also we look for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ." The word conversation has another meaning, citizenship, so our citizenship is in heaven. Jesus Christ's citizenship was in heaven too. He said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence." On this holiday, we sing songs about heaven while watching fireworks from a distance. A good idea is to invite someone else to heaven. We have also sometimes made edible or non-edible models of our mansions in heaven or of the New Jerusalem. In closing, I would like to end with the words of one man who wrote in the 1800s his view on Christian citizenship. "Christian citizenship is citizenship in heaven, for our citizenship is in heaven." Philippians 3:20. Christian patriotism is love of the country of one's citizenship, and true citizenship is the absolute and everlasting renunciation and abjuration of all allegiance and fidelity to every other prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty whatsoever. Is yours a true Christian citizenship? Are you a Christian patriot? To this I would add, have you renounced all allegiance to the prince of darkness, the architect of idolatrous worship? Do you love heavenly things? Is your citizenship in heaven?